So I ask my students, what's the most difficult thing in English? And they say, prepositions. Well, did you know there's a different way to learn prepositions? It's a new way of understanding prepositions, and university research comparing this new way of learning with traditional methods like collocation repeatedly finds that students using the new method score higher marks in tests. That students find it easier to remember the different meanings of prepositions. That students are more motivated to learn prepositions in the first place. That students enjoy the process of learning more because this new way of learning focuses on the logic behind preposition use. You say, logic, prepositions, logic. Seriously, there is a logical connection between, for example, the picture hanging on the wall, which is contact with a surface, and the event was cancelled on account of the bad weather, which is the reason for an action. The preposition on, in both cases, expresses something similar. Have a look at the following sentences. The preposition on in each sentence expresses a similar meaning. Can you guess what it is? Do you want me to tell you? Okay, but not yet. First, I want to give you a context for this information. What does a preposition do? What does a preposition do? I don't mean grammatically, I mean semantically. What does a preposition do? It gives us information about the relations between objects. What's the simplest information that a preposition can give? It's so simple that when you first learned it in English class at elementary level, you looked at pictures. The simplest information a preposition can give is about the relation between objects in space. It's spatial information. It's about spatial relations. Note pronunciation, spatial, special. It's easy to confuse. Special, spatial, spatial, special. I'm talking about spatial. If I say the word special, I'll put it in flashing lights on the screen. So, spatial information. And this new way of learning prepositions is going to look at the spatial information in two ways. One way will look at what happens to the spatial information when we use prepositions in non-spatial contexts. For example, time or emotional states. When you move from the spatial to the abstract. The second way looks at the spatial information itself. It looks in more detail at this information. Think about it. This is information you learnt at elementary level. Is this information still sufficient at intermediate level, upper intermediate level, advanced? Or is there more to the spatial information a preposition can give us? Everybody understands so far? Okay. So now, let's look at how we're going to use this spatial information to learn prepositions. Let's start with the first way of looking at it, the first aspect. So, let's look at the first aspect. What happens to the spatial information of a preposition when we use the preposition in non-spatial contexts, when we move from the spatial contexts to more abstract contexts? Let's take the example of the fruit is in the bowl. You know what it means. You understand the spatial information. The fruit is contained in the bowl. The bowl is a container. Okay, what about time? Let's talk about time. The meeting is in the morning. Is the morning a container? Do we think of mornings as containers? In lots of languages, yes. This is a common idea shared across different languages. Time is space. Time is a container. Periods are containers. Interesting. I think so. Okay. Let's take something more abstract. I'm in love. Is love a container? Are emotional states containers? In English, certainly. Across lots of languages, emotions are containers. Languages might differ in how they specifically use this idea, but it's a shared idea. And in English, an emotional state is a container. So, what's happening? What is happening? We've moved into the world of metaphor. And what that means is that you're going to be learning prepositions in a similar way as to how you should be learning idioms. Let's look at a basic structure for learning an idiom. You have a literal meaning and a metaphorical meaning, and the translation between the two is achieved by conceptual metaphors. Conceptual metaphors are things like time is space, emotional states are containers, anger is heat. Let's take the example of a simple idiom. You could see the steam coming out of his ears. Yeah? The literal meaning is obvious, and I think the metaphorical meaning is also quite obvious. Again, lots of languages share similar ideas about anger being expressed in terms of heat in some way. So, you can see the steam coming out of his ears. He's angry. How does this relate to prepositions? Well, it's exactly the same structure. The equivalent of the literal meaning of an idiom is the spatial meaning of the preposition. It's the spatial information a preposition can give us. We have the metaphorical meaning, which is the use of the preposition in more abstract contexts. And the translation happens, again, with conceptual metaphors. Okay. Now would be a good time to have a look at the example sentences I gave you earlier, and we can see how this metaphorical process works. But I'm not going to do that yet. There's another aspect we have to look at first, yeah? And that's the spatial information itself. So, now let's look at the second aspect, the second way, the spatial information itself. Because what you learned by looking at pictures at elementary level is actually no longer sufficient for understanding prepositions at intermediate level. You need to expand your knowledge of you need to expand your knowledge of the spatial information of a preposition. What do I mean by that? Let's look at a couple of simple examples. I'm at the supermarket. What does that mean? I'm at the supermarket. Your first reaction is, oh, it's a preposition of location. If there's only one supermarket where I live, then okay, that could be location. If I only ever go to one supermarket, then okay, that could be location. But for most of us, most of the time, there's lots of supermarkets. And saying I'm at the supermarket doesn't tell us which one. So what does that sentence mean? I'm at the supermarket. What are you doing? Oh, I'm at the supermarket. Ah. I'm not answering about location so much as telling you what I'm doing. I'm giving you functional information. I'm saying I'm engaged in the activity that you would normally associate with me at that location, which for most of us is shopping. If I worked at a supermarket, then the normal activity might be working. But here's the interesting thing. It's giving us two types of information. The preposition at is giving us two types of information. It's giving us spatial information in terms of location, but it's also giving us information about how we are interacting with that location. It's giving us functional information. Right. Let's take another example. The book is on the table. You can see the book on the table. And there's a mug on the table. But the mug is actually on a coaster. And the common way we understand the preposition on is with the concept contact. The book is on the table, the book is in contact with the table. But the mug is not in contact with the table. And if I put the mug on the book, is the mug on the table? Yes. So contact is not the only thing going on here. What other thing is going on? Think about the picture on the wall. Yeah? Again, there might be issues with contact. The picture might not actually be in contact with the wall. But what is the wall doing with the picture? Why doesn't the picture fall? Because it's supported. And the key to the support is the wall. That is the key. The book is on the table is supporting the book. The mug is on the table, even if it's not in contact with the table, because the table is stopping it falling, it's supporting it. And so now we're bringing in the force of gravity and resistance to the force of gravity. So the preposition on is giving us information about forces. So now we have three different types of information a preposition can give us. It can give us geometrical or topological information. It can give us functional information about interaction. And it can give us information about forces, something dynamic. Okay, so organising this information. The way these different types of spatial information have been presented to students in the university research is in the form of something called an image schema. I'll look at these in more detail in subsequent videos on individual prepositions, but here's a simple introduction. We have the core sense or main idea of the preposition, and next to this, a graphical representation. The initials TR and LM refer to concepts, trajector and landmark, Think of them like a variation of subject and object. In the example, the book is on the table. The book would be the trajector, TR, and the table would be the landmark, LM. Okay? And underneath, we have the three different types of spatial information. Sometimes only one of these categories might be relevant to the meaning of a preposition in a particular sentence. Here are some examples. However, in other cases, the meaning of the preposition might be arrived at through a combination of these different types of information. Let's take an example of the preposition on. The preposition on in a sentence like "the book is on the table" involves a topological idea of contact and a dynamic idea of downward force. And together, these help generate the main idea of support. You remember at the start of this video, I gave you some sentences with the preposition on. And I said the preposition on has a shared meaning in all of these sentences. And I promised I would tell you what it was. Well, now's the time. Because we've just looked at some examples of the preposition on with the table. And we discovered that the preposition on can express the idea of support. So have a look at those sentences again. Think about support. In each of these sentences, the preposition on is expressing the idea of support. And if we look at our conceptual metaphors for support, we start to see the specific meanings of all these sentences. You see the pattern now. You see the logic behind preposition use. What we need to do now is look at individual prepositions in a bit more detail. But that's for another video. Like, share, subscribe. Leave comments down below, and I'll see you next time.